That was the goal, to build the world's largest language solutions company, make it a one-stop shop for language services with offices around the world. But there are thousands of translation companies out there because there were, at the time, they were tiny. They were started and run by translators who were very skilled, very talented, but they were doing the translations and running the company. So how do you scale a company when you're doing that labor-intensive, high-level work all day? You can't. And after 26 years in business, we became the world's largest language solutions company. And that's when I sold.
Welcome to Dr. Patty Ann's podcast. And today I have a great episode from a phenomenal woman that I know you're going to learn how to win from. But before we go any further, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast because I know you're going to just love it. So today's guest is the CEO and founder of her own foundation. But way before then, she was an incredible entrepreneur that created a company in her NYU dorm room while she was in graduate school. I went to NYU. Unfortunately, I didn't know her at the time. And the company was called TransPerfect. And it was one of the world's largest language solution companies, which like billions of dollars of revenue before she sold it. And before you had all these other language apps and things going on. So this woman is a true pioneer. So allow me to welcome Liz Elting to the podcast. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patty Ann. It's wonderful to be here.
Okay, so I am so excited to have you. And, do you speak other languages, by the way?
I did study 4 languages by the time I graduated from high school, and that's how I fell in love with languages. Yes, and I'm pretty rusty now, but yes, love languages.
And we come back. Which language? Oh, so the Romance?
So I studied, by the time I graduated from high school, Portuguese, French, Latin, and Spanish. So yes, the Romance language.
Wow.
And then I majored in languages in college. Yeah.
Okay, but that's so unusual for an American. Were you living in the States? Were you living in Switzerland? What sparked the interest? The Swiss, they have 5 borders, so they all speak, 27 languages.
You're right. No, that's a great question. So I was so fortunate because I was able, when I was 8, to move to Portugal. My family moved to Portugal. And so when I was 8 and 9, I lived there. And at the school I went to there, they taught Portuguese and French. So that's where I started learning languages. And then when I was 10, my family moved to Toronto, and I started learning French, or continued learning French, I should say. And then in high school, I decided to start studying Latin and then Spanish. So that was really how. And then during college, I did my junior year in Spain, so continued with the Spanish. And then right after college, worked in Venezuela. So that was how it all happened.
Wow. How international. So I speak one other language. It's called Brooklynese. That's it.
So you're from Brooklyn. I love it. Oh, that's wonderful.
That's right. Okay. All right. So we sort of kind of jumped in here, but I do want to ask a question. So can you share with us, and I'm curious to know because you've had a heck of a childhood, right? Share with us an experience or a life event that you had that very much influenced the success that you created. But the caveat, Liz, is that the event, the situation has to be something that most people don't know about you, not in your book, and they can't Google it. Many of us have something that's happened to us that has very much shaped the person we are today, the success we've had, but it's not the kind of thing that we really talk about for many different reasons.
Oh boy. So it's not in my book. Okay.
Right. Because we want people to buy your book. You're going to be so fascinating when we're done. So we don't want to give them that story. They'll get other stories from the book today.
Yeah, because I do have a number of anecdotes in that book that really shaped who I am. So that's why, oh boy, that's an excellent question. And as you can tell, I'm kind of struggling with it because something that
That's
happened to
okay. That's
me
okay. That's okay.
that I haven't mentioned that kind of shaped me into the person I am. Okay. I mean, you know, it's
Look, we talked before we came on the air, Liz. Let me
okay.
see if I can help you. And
Okay.
to my listeners, like listening to Liz and where she's lived, I feel like the most provincial person on the planet. Like she's lived all these different countries. She's really been exposed to. There's been so many unique experiences that you've had, that I'm sure there are unique experiences within those experiences. So maybe that helps you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really the relationships I had. When I think about how I moved to Portugal when I was 8, and the friends I made back then, I mean, and some were American and some were Portuguese, and I had a very, very good friend who was Turkish, and I remember her
Mm,
well. And I guess what I learned during that time is we're all the same, right?
mhm.
There I am with people from other countries. I'm 8 years old. Their native language is not mine, and we have more in common than we are different than we have that's different. And I loved communicating with them in their language, if that was a language I was learning, and I just loved communicating with them at all and really bonding. So I learned that during my time in Portugal, and then of course I lived in Toronto
And the
after that.
Portuguese are known for being incredibly friendly people as well. Yeah.
Oh, so friendly, so
Yeah.
warm. I met
Hospitable. Yeah.
amazing people. They're hospitable. Exactly. And then Toronto, I met more people from different backgrounds and bonded with them. And then, of course, I continued with my language studies. But then my junior year in Spain, and I will mention this because that year, because my major encompassed 2 languages, Spanish and French, my plan had
Mhm.
been to do first semester in Cordoba, Spain, and second semester in Paris, France. And I remember my advisor at college said to me, Liz, I don't think that's a good idea. Go to only one country because it takes a while to acclimate and to really get comfortable there. And I said, no, my languages are Spanish and French, so I want to do a semester in each country. And then what happened is I got to Spain, and I remember it being quite difficult for that first month communicating because they were just rattling off in Spanish. I couldn't
So
understand.
fast.
Yes,
Yeah.
so fast. I had taken Spanish for 6 years, but it's a whole different thing to live in the country rather than being in the classroom. And I didn't know what they were saying. And then after about a month, it clicked. And then also after about 2 months, I got very close to people there, many of whom were Spaniards. And I realized he was right. I can't leave. So I ended up calling up my advisor saying, you were right. You were so right. I'd like to cancel Paris and stay in Cordoba, Spain. And the point was, I fell in love with the people there and I bonded with them. And they really were different from me as far as their background. And I thought, okay, but they were the same as me as far as, their heart, the people that I connected
Mhm.
with. So I learned that. So and I ended up living in Venezuela and the same thing. So I guess my point is that all led to what I ultimately did with my life, which was started a company to bring the world together through language, to break down borders, because we all belong together. We all should be together. Our hearts are the same as long as we're finding like-minded people with similar
Mhm.
values. We can find anywhere. So those experiences really led to what I ended up doing with my life, both through my career and now my foundation, breaking down borders and bringing people together.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm reminded of so I went to Saudi Arabia right before they were giving women the right to drive, which even saying that blows my mind. And then I went on national TV and I gave a couple of interviews. And I remember saying, what I learned there, in very different culture. And I'm like you, I am a quintessential American, New York American. Like we are just, a New York American is different than every other American woman. And what I found is that we are so much more alike than we are different. It really is incredible. And my international listeners will get this, and I'm a diehard American patriot, but Americans can be so provincial, and we really do ourselves a disservice by not going outside our country for many different reasons. Any experience? What is your take on that?
Oh, absolutely. And that was certainly the case when I was growing up, because back then, very few people studied languages, or certainly they didn't study four different languages. So I was,
Right.
I had a wonderful situation because my parents brought me up to be open-minded, and we moved to Portugal and we
Right.
moved to Canada.
Now I
And
have to ask. I'm just curious. Was your dad like a diplomat or something,
he
or
wasn't,
international
but
businessman?
he was actually, yeah, he was in business. He was initially in marketing and then he moved over to advertising, but he got the opportunity to open Kentucky Fried Chicken in Portugal when I was 8. So he left his job at Gray Advertising in New York to do that. But the problem was, after we got there, the Portuguese Communist Revolution broke out. So he was not able to ultimately open KFC. So instead,
Right.
he opened some Italian restaurants with his joint venture partner, and we had to leave after a year. But then because he
Wow.
wanted to do something international, but he wanted to be in a safer place because Portugal wasn't so safe given
Right.
revolution. We ended up in Canada. So that was why. And he got transferred there with Gray Advertising, which is who he had gone back to. But yes, we're much more the same than we are different. And you're right. A lot of Americans stay with their own kind. I mean, and they don't want to explore the world. And I mean, one of the experiences that happened to me is when I was in Spain, I had my first serious boyfriend, and he was Spanish and he didn't speak any English. And he was provincial. I mean, they were all provincial too. He had never left the country. No one there
Mm-hmm.
spoke English back in the 80s. Now it's a different world and
Mm-hmm.
globalization has happened. They have, but the point is, yes, Americans probably can even be more provincial sometimes than people in other countries because they're not brought up learning the languages that they are in other
Right.
countries.
Well,
And
in fairness to us, we have to go there, right? You can, we go from New York to Connecticut and just pay the toll.
that's right. That's
Right.
right. Yes, that's
Okay.
right.
So when you were at Trinity College, which I believe is where you went, right? And I raised my family in
Yes.
Connecticut, so I know Connecticut. That's pretty purebred, especially back then. Were you an anomaly there?
Yes. And, just
Am I
related
getting
to
in
being.
trouble? Am I getting in trouble?
No, but related to that relates to the other thing. The last thing I'll say on Spain and the people I met there, as provincial as Americans were and nationalistic and all that, they were too. They would say things to me like, "Wow, you're Jewish? I've never met a Jewish person before." So, and I only think of that because Trinity, the name. It sounds, like it wouldn't be a place where there are so many Jews. The answer
Right,
is,
but
but anyway,
Trinity is is not religious, though. I mean,
that's
Trinity
right.
is a regular. Yeah,
It's a regular
yeah,
school, but it still has that name. So it can be
yeah.
misleading. When I went, it was quite, it had a reputation. It was very much a lot of people from prep school.
Bougie,
Yes,
bougie.
yes, and a little waspy, but it did have its share of
See, now I'm
diversity.
from New York. I know what a WASP is. Some listeners might not know what a WASP is. So it's white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. That's what a WASP is,
Oh, okay.
right?
Well,
Yeah.
yes, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Yes. But yes, but there were some Jews, there were some, people from Black people, not really Latinos, because back then we didn't get to meet people from, now it's more diverse. The great thing about Trinity, and I am
Mm-hmm.
very involved in Trinity now, I'm on the board and I'm on a bunch
Oh,
of
you
different
are?
committees. Oh, yes, very involved in Trinity. I'm on involved in about 3 different groups. I'm also on the board of their entrepreneurship center, but they become very diverse, much more diverse. And that's exciting. That's what
Yes.
we all need. We need diversity. That's how we learn about other cultures and we come together and we realize we're more the same than different. But yes, I was a bit of an anomaly at Trinity also because I was from Canada.
Oh, right.
And I went to a high school. Yes, I went to, and now Trinity and all of these American universities have a much bigger international contingent,
Yeah.
but back then Trinity didn't, or none of them did back then. But I came from Toronto, where I didn't even have a high school graduation because everybody went to grade 13 in Toronto. That's what we had back then. If you went to university. Back then you went to grade 13. But because I was going to an American college, I only went through grade 12 and I didn't have an official graduation. I mean, I graduated, but not
Yeah.
the way they did. And so I was an anomaly also because I had, a little more of an international background, but I met some
Right.
wonderful people there. And now Trinity has changed a lot and it's a wonderful place.
Right. Great.
Yeah.
So you then go to NYU, my alma mater, where I have 2 masters and 3 degrees from. And when I was learning about you, I'm like, you probably hate this analogy, but I'm like, oh, this is the Mark Zuckerberg of languages. He develops a company in her dorm. So tell us about that.
Well, thank you. So what happened was I worked in Venezuela, then I got to New York when I was 21. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do? And actually, I thought I was going to go to DC and find a job doing something international there. But my sister was living there and I stayed with her for a couple of days and I told her I was looking for a job. And she said, actually, there's a translation company out there that is owned by Ogilvy, the ad agency, and my sister was working at Ogilvy. This was in 1987. My sister knew about it because she was working at Ogilvy and Mather Direct, O&M Direct, their direct marketing firm. So I called them up, ended up getting a job at this translation company in 1987. And I was able to work there for 3 years. And I worked in production, and then I was able to move over to sales, which is what I had wanted. And I loved the company and the industry, but I thought it could be done differently and better. I saw a gap between what clients needed and what was available in the industry. So after being there for 3 years, I thought, there's really nowhere, there weren't a lot of places for me to go within that company. Right. It was a relatively flat organization. So I thought, I'll go get my MBA, I'll diversify my skills, maybe get a degree in something business related because I didn't take that in undergrad. And then maybe I'll work somewhere else for a few years and then figure it out. So I ended up getting my MBA from NYU. And then I ended up majoring in finance and international business. And finance was not my thing at all, but I was being practical. I have a tendency to be practical. And back then, that was the thing to major in 1992 when I graduated from NYU. 70% of
that's right. Investment banking, Wall Street, Goldman Sachs was the be all and end all. How things have changed. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. All about investment banking and all those names you just said. That was the name. And so I thought, well, maybe it's as exciting as people say. Maybe it's as lucrative. Maybe it's the place to be. So I ended up majoring in it. And it was not where my heart was. And then I got a job. I had trouble getting a job at those places, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan.
Because you're a woman, let's face it. Well, NYU has always been prestigious. I bet you plenty of your classmates got jobs there. Just saying.
They did. And I ended up getting one at the proprietary trading division of a French bank. And I thought, okay. I'll take it.
Lazard? Was it Lazard?
No, it was a different one. It was called Compagnie Parisienne de Compte, but it was a big French bank and it was their trading division. And I thought, well, it's doing equity arbitrage. Maybe I'll learn something. And it's a French bank. So maybe I'll get to travel to France. Maybe I'll get to use my French, something. I got there and I realized immediately that I was the only woman at my level or pretty much at any level. I was the only woman. And that's where I experienced my first bout of sexism. Whenever the phone rang.
Did you have a trading job or did they make you the secretary?
Well, I thought I was going to have a
highly paid
That's
secretary.
What I was.
Yeah.
How I what?
I said you were hired for one job, but then did they have you be the secretary?
Yes, absolutely. Whenever the phone rang, they would yell, Liz, phone, because there wasn't a receptionist. So I became the receptionist. And the same with the getting the coffee and the ordering the supplies. So I thought, oh my God. So I was doing higher level things at the translation company I was at in sales and production. I was talking to clients. I was solving their problems. I was selling projects and I was getting the quality work done. And now I'm the secretary, now that I have my MBA.
Mm.
So I thought, okay, this is misery. And I also learned finance was not for me. And I thought, even if I was treated better, I didn't want to be at Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan. I realized I
Yeah,
had
make rich
loved the
people
other
richer.
industry because I was
That's all they
dealing.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas at the translation company, I got to deal with people from all different cultures, which I loved, work in all different languages, and solve clients' problems. So I thought that was a lot more fun. The job in finance was number crunching and paper pushing. It was not for me. And then
Mhm.
even at the highest level, it was too much talking about money and numbers, but it was abstract. I liked things that were
Mhm.
more, I could relate to better. So
Mhm.
I quit. After only 4 weeks, I went to my boss and I said, I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. How much notice do you need? And he said, Liz, 2 weeks is fine. So I stayed another 2 weeks. And after a total of 6 weeks, I left that job and started TransPerfect out of an NYU business school dorm room, which I was still
But
living in, even though I had already graduated, which I can
but
explain why, but that's where the company
okay.
started.
Okay, but hang on. So when you started TransPerfect though, what was your hope for it? What did you think it was going to look like? Like what
Yeah,
did you think you were creating?
right. And the reason I started it, okay, yes, why did I create it? I thought, well, should I do this? Because I know I loved the industry and I have ideas on how it can be done better, but there are thousands of translation companies out there because there were at the time, they were tiny. They were started and run by translators who were very skilled, very talented, but they were doing the translations and running the company. So how do you scale a company when you're doing that labor intensive high level work all day? You
Yeah.
can't. So I wasn't translator level anyway. I had studied languages, but I couldn't translate technical material the way they
Mhm.
could, or translate really anything the way they could. So I thought, I couldn't. I could proofread and find mistakes, but I couldn't do what they could. I thought, we will be pioneers in this industry. We will grow it into the world's largest by being business people who work with all these talented linguists and clients
Mhm.
and bring them together and, solve the client's problems. And that was the goal, to build the world's largest language solutions company, make it a one-stop shop for language services with offices around the world. And after 26 years in business, we became the world's largest language solutions company. And that's when I sold. So it
That's
was
great.
exciting.
Okay,
It
so
was exciting,
when you
but it was a
started,
lot of
was it
hard
just
work. It was a lot
yourself?
of drama.
Oh, of
No.
course, of course.
So
But when you started, was it just you? Was it just you?
no,
You were by yourself starting the company.
not well. I'll
Okay,
tell
who
you
was
that.
with who'd you
Okay,
partner
so
with?
this is the crazy situation that happened. It's always a little crazy. I was living with my boyfriend at the time, who
Mhm.
I had met at NYU when I was starting my second year at NYU. He was starting his first year. We were in an international finance class together, and that's where we met. And then I ended up graduating and trying out this job. But at this point, my boyfriend and I had moved in together. And so I had quit the job that I just mentioned, that finance job. And I said to him, I want to try starting a translation company. I was miserable there. I want to try this out. And he was finishing up his second year. And this was technically, yeah. So, I mean, we were living together and he was finishing up his second year. And so he said, I would love to do it with you. Let's be partners. And we started it together, even though he was still finishing his second year of business school and he had a part-time job to make a very, very little money. It's a few hours a week. But we did start it together as 50-50 partners, even though I was doing it all day long full time and he was doing those other things
Mhm.
I just mentioned.
Mhm. Okay, so it sounds like that did
Yeah.
not go well. How did that end?
Yeah. So we had
Because I work
quite a
with a lot of
dramatic
business.
experience.
I work with a lot of business partners. So that's why I'm
Okay.
asking. I do a
Oh,
lot, and
yes. Yes.
yeah.
In the early days, we were still in love. We got along. And then actually after 4 years, we got engaged. And then realized it didn't make sense and we didn't belong together. We were fighting like cats and dogs. We broke up. But at this point, the company was about $5 million in revenue. The hardest part was over. I'm trying to think, maybe 50 employees, but very hard to get to that point. We all as entrepreneurs know that.
Sure.
And neither of us wanted to say goodbye to the company. And so
Well, it's like your baby. It's like your baby.
It was our baby. Exactly. We didn't want to, what's the word? Break the baby. Yes. Yes.
Split the baby in half. Yeah.
It was our baby. Yes. Split the baby in. Yes. So we both kept working at the company together. And it was rocky. We disagreed a lot. We fought a lot. And then it got very bad after about 20 years, after the company had been in business 20 years. So,
so you stayed together working as partners for like 20 years. So that's a long time.
Yeah. So, right. You're right. It was. So around 2012. So we started it in 1992. In 2012, it started getting really bad. And one thing we did wrong, and I always recommend to partners, they make sure they do this right, because we didn't. You must have a shareholders agreement, a proper shareholders agreement that you create at the start of the company, at the outset. We didn't, because we had no money.
So Liz, I will tell you, when I work with business partners, either they're intimate or they're not, whatever the situation is, or venture capital firms will bring me in, or they're merging and they know like everyone's got to start to get along, right? But, or not kill each other at the very least. But I have a whole, like people will bring me in to say, I'm thinking about partnering. And there's a whole process I take them through. And one of them is an agreement on, if this happens, what? If this happens. And you're right, the majority of people don't have that, especially if you're an intimate couple, because you're in love. You're going to be in love forever until you're not. Yeah.
And that was exactly what happened. First of all, we really did have no money, and he had business school debt. And I had a few $1,000s in the bank. He had business school debt. So we were in the red, but still, you must have that shareholders agreement, because otherwise you will have a mess of a situation, which is what we had. And even if you're in love, even if you're father and daughter or father and son, even if you're brother and sister, whatever it is, you must have that. And you need it, because you need to establish roles, responsibilities, decision-making, dispute resolution, what happens in the event of death, disability, divorce, and what happens if one of you wants out of the company or one of you wants the other out of the company, and how is the company valued? So that's why
you're going through all my checklists with people. Yeah.
Okay. And we didn't have it. The other thing we did wrong is we were 50-50 owners with no decision maker. And I always say to people, if you're doing
everything.
Yeah. So we would disagree constantly, and there was no one to break the tie. So we tried different things along the way. We had all kinds of different solutions along the way, and we got by, and we did grow it into the world's largest, but there was a lot of drama, a lot of fighting, not what I would recommend for anyone. It was very difficult. Okay. So I recommend that if you're doing it with a partner, you ideally are the decision maker, right? Because everyone wants to make the decisions. Course. That's why they become an entrepreneur. So
4951. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, Okay. So you do that 51% or more, and you're good if it's one other partner. Okay. Then what happened is, after about 20 years, we were fighting, we couldn't agree. And then finally what happened, what happened is I said to him, we've got to have this shareholders agreement. We've got to finally do it so we can come up with a solution, and also how we will value the company if one of us wants out. We could not agree on this shareholders agreement. It was too late. We were the largest, or we were the most profitable company in the industry at that point. We were one of the largest at that point. Anyway, I had to litigate in 2014. I had to basically bring in attorneys and litigate to get. It was bad.
Expensive and emotionally exhausting.
Yes, I spent about $50 million in legal fees, which obviously it's very expensive, and then it was heart wrenching. Once I did that, we had about 20 different lawsuits going on. I mean, it wasn't just one. And what I asked for in my main lawsuit was for a custodian charge to resolve deadlock in the short term, so break ties in the short term, and oversee the sale of the company in the longer term, where I could buy him out, he could buy me out, or a third party could buy us both out.
Mhm.
And fortunately, I got what I asked for there, where we got the custodian to be in charge. He became chairman of the board. We didn't have any board. My partner and I had been the
Mhm.
board. He
Mhm.
came in, he was chairman of the board, and he set the company up for sale. And then we were able to finally go our separate ways. And it was time. And that was after I had been at the company 26 years. And so it was time, but
Wow.
it was very rocky, very heart-wrenching. You don't want to get into a situation like that ever. And certainly not when you have a lot of other employees involved too, and clients involved too, which is
Yeah.
what we had. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And so you sold it, and then that worked out. Like, was it a 50-50 split?
So what happened was, in a nutshell, and it's a whole story in itself, but
I'm
I
sure. Yeah.
I ended up selling my 50%, and he ended up continuing with the company. I mean, he's still there. He still owns it. And now I've been able to do all the things I wanted to do that I didn't have time to do for 26
Mhm.
years. And I am loving life. It was time. Sometimes something other than us makes the decision for when things happen, but what a blessing. I am loving
Yeah.
life, and
I,
it was time for change.
I still get it, and I feel that from you. And I don't want to be like this, but you have the last laugh, right? You sold, and now you're dreaming big, and you're winning. So I'm sure this launches into your book, right? So so you sold in 2020?
Well, so I sold, actually, it was now 2018. And
Okay.
so the rest of 2018 and 2019, I did a lot of work with my foundation. I started my foundation, the Elizabeth Elting Foundation. And what I wanted to do there
And
was
what's the foundation? What's the cause of the foundation? Because
sure.
I think that's incredible that you do that.
Thank you. And our mission is to help support and empower women and people from marginalized communities, really to help the world be a more fair and equal place, to make it so
Kinder?
kinder, gentler, fair, women paid as much, people from diverse populations paid as much, people treated as well, and everybody having the same opportunity. And that is our core mission. And we are involved in many, many causes to accomplish those goals. And then some related causes as well, because along the way, as you're dealing with these issues, you find other issues to deal with, like
Mm-hmm.
heart disease, which we still do, focusing on women and people from marginalized communities, but cancer, gun safety, hunger, but they all relate to, even
Right.
those relate to women and people from diverse and marginalized populations. And it's been so gratifying.
So what's your favorite and I understand this is like asking you who's your favorite child. Having said that, what's the cause that you just get
Oh,
tickled pink over?
yeah, that is such a great question. And that's a hard one. And I'm really not
I
trying
know.
to avoid answering your question. The reason I struggle with that one is I started this foundation. I knew I wanted to help women because, being a woman, I experienced plenty of sexism along the way, and, throughout. And you did too. And
Of course we did.
so did our Yes, we all did. And, you and I, because maybe when we started, yes, absolutely. It was even harder then, but still women are experiencing it. Still, the world is not fair.
Yep.
So and then our employees did. I mean, they, in different ways. So
Yes.
that's incredibly near and dear to my heart. I guess if I were to pick, that's probably the biggest, but that then goes into a lot of the organizations I work with, the nonprofits that our foundation works with. So I guess that would be the biggest, just because,
Okay.
I lived it, and over half of us lived it. Yes.
Yeah.
Then what happened is, of course, 2020, 21 happened. We were all dealing with COVID, and I was still dealing with
Mm.
the foundation work that we were talking about, just not as much in person. But I still was speaking to entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs about, and college students and grad school students, business school students, about how I built my business. And I loved that. I really loved that. So I thought, I'll do a book about it. And I'll talk about what I learned based on what I did right and the many things I did wrong, and life lessons as well that I learned
Mhm.
in the process. So in 2022 wrote the book, in 2023 got out there and launched it, and chief marketing officer, chief sales officer for the
Right.
officer for the book, and spoke about the book. And I'm still doing that every day. But I am loving it because it's fun. It's fun because you try to share what you learned along the way, and give back, and I'm really enjoying that process. So, yes.
And you have so much to, and people have so much to learn from you. So what's one of the biggest mistakes that you made that you almost cringe when you have to tell it?
Well, I mentioned what we did wrong as far as the lack of shareholders agreement and
Oh, right.
the lack of being a decision maker. So I always tell people they need to do that. I also made mistakes as far as how I managed people in the early days or led people,
Mm.
because I had virtually no leadership experience, and I was a little too tough, a little too do this, do that, and thinking that's what you're supposed to do. I hadn't watched a lot of bosses, and so I really didn't know what I was doing. And I learned to be a kinder, more empathetic boss. I learned to be a listener and understand what was important to each person, and then incentivize them based on that, whether it was, positive recognition, whether it was learning, whether it was a title, whether it was a certain work
Mhm.
life balance that we could create, whatever it was. And, listening to people. So I learned that. That was a lesson. And then I also learned, as far as hiring people, at least for our internal people, not for our translators, because most of our linguists
Mhm.
were subcontractors. They were outside,
Mhm.
of our regular employees, but we had thousands of regular, full-time
Mhm.
W-2 employees. And those, I learned, it wasn't so much about the skills or experience they had. It's about the mindset, the attitude. Were they like-minded? Were they hard workers, entrepreneurial, motivated, curious,
The
innovative?
growth mindset. Yeah.
Yes, growth mindset, and not so much the actual experience they came in with,
Yeah.
because that could be learned for most of the internal
Exactly.
positions. Yes. So I learned that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a
Based
great,
based on lots
that's a
of
great,
hiring mistakes, based on many hiring
but
mistakes.
that's a great share because to be, to cut yourself some slack, Liz, most leaders today, because I do leadership training, most leaders today have no clue. And I'll be coaching CEOs, whether they're entrepreneurs or corporate, and their attitude is like this. Oh, I'm already the CEO. I'm like, but you don't know
Still?
anything. Well,
Yeah.
it depends upon the industry. It's changing. But like, for example, most companies, the top sales guy ends up becoming the sales leader. He might know nothing about leadership. He might be awesome at sales, but then you just put him there and then he's figuring out as he goes. And if you're lucky, he's trying to learn. And there's so much information out there now, which is great. But, when you were starting, it was the old school, command and control. And now we have trust and inspire, right? And it's a whole different attitude. And quite frankly, and I can say a lot of negative things about the kids today, but a lot of positive too. And they're not putting up with the crap that we
No.
would have put up with, right?
Yeah.
Like they saw their parents slave away for years. And let's say at 20, I'm making this up, at 20 years, you get a pension. And the parents got fired, laid off at 19 years. That wasn't a coincidence. Like that is so wrong.
Yeah.
That is
Horrible. It's
so
horrible.
wrong. And I think they're looking for growth and development. They're looking for leadership skills. And I think that's great. So I think your message is timed absolutely perfectly. Perfectly.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean,
Tell me about fun now.
yeah.
Tell me about fun.
Okay. Well, fun. I do get a little goal oriented, like, I got the book out now. I need to sell as many books and as I need to speak in as many things. So I'm very busy with that right now, but I've sort of tried to put an end time. Well, okay, that's more my life. But the answer is, what do I love to do?
Boundaries. You're talking about you just
Yeah,
talking
I
about
have
boundaries. So
to.
no, talk about that with women, because you're right. We'll work entrepreneurs.
Right.
We'll work till midnight and then get up and start again.
Right. And we do it because we're often so motivated and so goal oriented, which I talk a lot about, but I've got to put boundaries on it myself and make sure
Right.
after all this, I do all the things I've wanted to do that I love doing
Right.
that I haven't had the time for. So, and this is what happened when I sold too. So after 26 years at my company, I started doing all the things I never had time to. I mentioned like starting the foundation, but also, my kids, I didn't get to go on maternity leave. And the reason I'm mentioning this is my boys were in ninth grade and 11th grade, actually finishing up at the end of ninth grade and 11th grade. And I got to spend a little more time with them. Love that. Love spending time with my kids, my family. Whether it's just, whether it's just hanging out or whether it's going to baseball games. They're both Major League Baseball lovers, going to different stadiums with them or watching the games on TV or going to New York Yankees and Mets games. Love all that. Okay, so family time for sure. Love traveling. Love. And
of course.
Yes, have some great trips coming up. And yes, the key.
Where are you going?
Well, a lot of my trips actually, okay, so I guess I'm going to Palm Beach on Saturday. So that'll be fun.
Beautiful.
For 10 days. And then in Boston, I'm going in March to Boston. That's for book related events. But then in April, I'm going to Palm Springs area where my dad and his wife live. And then going to Denver in June, going to the Michigan area on Labor Day. So a lot of those are for specific things, but then got a very fun international trip coming up to bunch of different countries, and that's in September and October, and that goes to Italy, Greece, Malta, Albania, Montenegro, Croatia. So places I haven't been, those last few I have not been. So I love going new places. So those are some of the fun things.
I just went to Croatia and Montenegro. You'll love it.
Oh,
I literally just went there.
Oh, wow.
We love to travel.
Proud. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, you'll love it. Are you on a book tour there or no?
No, so that is just pleasure, which I'm so much of the other things I'm doing are related to the book tour, but that should be fun. That's wonderful that you just did that.
Now, if your son's finishing up 11th grade, he's going to be a senior in high school.
Right. I didn't explain that very well. No, now
their ages?
That was when I sold my company in 2018.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're both in college now. No, they're out of college.
Yeah. One graduated in May and the other is a junior in college. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the travel, definitely excited for that. And then I love reading. I love spending time with family and friends.
Are you married?
I am married.
Okay. We'll throw him in there.
Yes. Oh, yes. Definitely spend time with my husband. Yep. He's going on the trip with me in September and October and a bunch of these other trips. I mentioned some of them. And what else? What else do I love doing? I love doing lots of things. I mean, going to plays, going to movies, going to concerts. I mean, just being in nature, walking, hiking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spending time on the beach. So yeah, I mean, lots of fun.
Great. So I could talk to you forever. I definitely want to meet up with you next time I'm in New York for sure. But I just want to ask you this one more question. Then I'm going to want you to talk a little bit about yourself. I'm going to want you to unabashedly promote yourself. But I have one more question. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. Imagine there's a huge box in front of you right now. Huge box. And inside that box is everything you've ever lost in your life. What's the first thing you'd reach for and why?
Oh my, well, these are difficult questions. A box with everything I've lost. A box with, okay, what have I lost? Well, I guess, as we grow older and we go through that phase that we get married and have kids, and then we have our full-time job, our career, we might lose, our some of our freedom and our spontaneity and our just
Mhm.
ability to just go and do whatever we want whenever we want. And that's part of being an adult. But
Mhm.
I'm excited in this next phase of my life to bring some of that back.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
try to remove some of the responsibilities, and I'm fortunate now. I'm sort of in that empty nester phase, which I actually feel like I
Mhm.
just started. But then I'm yes, I'm working hard on this book, but I'm about to have a lot of freedom, and I'm going to
Mhm.
take advantage and use it before I feel like I can't do what I want when I want, and make sure I have time to do all the things we were just talking about. So I guess it's just that freedom to do what I want when I want. I always have kind of put these limitations on myself, these boundaries on myself, like, oh, got to do this, got to do that, and I'm excited to break free and do what I would do when I was young, when I was a kid, when I was just
Great.
free. Yeah.
I
Free
love
to
it. I love
do
the
whatever I want.
spontaneity and living your best
Yes.
life. Great. All
Yes.
right, Liz, I want you now to plug your book, unabashedly promote yourself, tell people where you want to go to get your book, where they can learn more about you. Go.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Patty Ann. So my book is on sale. It's on Amazon.com and it's on a lot of online retailers. I mean, many, many, but Amazon.com is a great place to get it. The hardcover, the audio version, and then it's in bookstores across the US as well, and in Barnes and Noble. And so very easy to find. And I would love it if you'd buy it. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller. It was number 2 on the list.
Congratulations.
And it was on that Wall Street Journal list for 3 consecutive weeks when it came out in the fall. And yes, I would love it if you'd read it, because maybe there are just, a few lessons you can learn. And I try to make it more fun than your typical business book, more like a
Mhm.
beach read business
Mhm.
book, little more fast moving, fun, funny, authentic, vulnerable. And that's really what I tried to do with it. I tried to make it into the book I wished I had had when I was either starting my career or in the years that I was an entrepreneur and in business. So would love it
Great.
if
I love that. I love that. A beach reading business book. What's not to love about that? That is phenomenal. So Liz, thank you so much. You are such an inspiration. I am just struck by your energy and your kindness and all your wisdom. So I am so grateful to have had you as a guest on this podcast. So I really, really appreciate it. And thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Patty Ann. I'm so grateful to you. I've absolutely adored speaking with you. You're amazing.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And that concludes today's episode of Dr. Patty Ann's podcast. Please, I encourage you, a beach read business book. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Dream big and win. I encourage you to go get it. And I encourage you, since I know you love this podcast, to make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. And until next time, be well.